Hello, my name is Emmy DeGrappa. Each week, we bring you stories asking our guests the question why. We learn about passion, purpose, and the human experience. Brought to you by Wyoming Humanities with the generous support of the Wyoming Community Foundation. This is What's Your Why? Today, we are talking to editorial cartoonist Ryan Stolp. He is the creative force behind the Lift Lines cartoons that appear in the Jackson Hole Daily. Ryan will be one of the cartoonists who will be part of the Wyoming Humanities Cartoon Caption Contest. Welcome, Ryan.
Thanks for having me.
So really, it's about getting to know you and getting to know your background and how you ended up in Jackson Hole.
All right. So a backstory on my cartooning journey. Always loved drawing. And I had an uncle, actually, who's in the medical field, but was also a passionate cartoonist. And he cartooned kind of about medical stories and had a little book. And as a kid, I always thought that was pretty neat. So continued drawing with friends and was kind of the guy that people tapped for T-shirt designs in middle school and high school. And then when I went to college, there was a ton of campus groups and they needed shirts and cartoons as well. They were quick and easy. They translate well to T-shirt designs or flyers. And I ended up getting involved with a campus publication, a bi-monthly magazine, the Tufts Observer. And they gave me, I was the police blotter editor. And I was like, well, why don't we illustrate these hilarious stories of college antics, parties, people getting drunk, people getting in trouble, because that's the only reason people read the police blotter. And so it went from a quarter page to the full back page, and a lot of the reason why I think people wanted to read our little publication. And from there, I ended up getting a strip, which I ran for 3 years. As far as kind of the transition to political cartooning, I was with my roommate at the time, and this was 2007 to 2011. A lot of change in the world right after the crash, a lot of kind of more awareness around LGBT rights and women's advocacy and rights. And he was like, well, Ryan, you have this great comic strip. You do a funny comic about just campus life. Have you ever, you should use it as a platform to, have a message. And I should have known that, but that was maybe the first time I started packaging a little more of a perspective or a lens for my readers to kind of unpack more complicated issues. And since then, continued to draw, illustrate on the side, and ended up in Jackson through a series of events. I was dog sledding at the time and doing illustrations for them when I wasn't running dogs, and had a friend that had an opportunity to do something in Jackson. Started a media agency here, and through that had access to publish in the paper. And I was like, well, I just want to get a couple jokes off my chest, because coming from the East Coast in North Carolina and Vermont, Boston to Jackson, a lot of things jumped out at me as hilarious and just very odd and weird. And so I was like, okay, I'll just do 3 jokes, then I'll be done. I'll get out of my system and I can move on with my life. And it became endless since then. That was 3 years ago, and more than 600 comics ago. It's an endless well here. It's really a cartoonist makes writer's block go away.
Well, that's really good to hear. And what are some of the funny things that stand out to you moving from the East Coast to Jackson?
I think the 2 first comics, these are the ones I was like, oh, this is funny. It's a small town. Jackson has a couple stoplights and stop signs. In just busier cities, right side has the right of way. And I felt like nobody understood that. And they were just applying the alternate rule from a ski lift line. And it was like, just alternate however it works. And so I did a comic where I replaced a stop sign with the alternate ski thing. Or the fact that you have to meet people twice because they have goggles and ski jackets and masks on. And so, it's like, why don't we do I think it was the police blotter headshots, which everyone was checking at the time. Like, they should just do them with the goggles on so people would know who we're talking about. It kind of spun off from there. So not always a political bent, but definitely kind of a locals in the know.
Mm-hmm.
angle.
So do you ever rub anybody the wrong way with your comics? Do you get a lot of comments about different issues that you tackle?
I have gotten more critical and maybe taking a side lately, but I never try to have it come from a point of like anger or ridicule. I try to have there always be like a subtle element to it. I'd say like a couple times I get angry letters from people that advertise in the paper as well, and they see it as, hey, I'm advertising. Why are you running a comic that seems to be contradictory? The angriest I ever got was from, it was just misinterpreted. It was a little too deep. Maybe it was when Elon Musk was shorting stocks, and I made a parallel to stocks and the ski pass as like, well, I'll buy them back because they'll go up in value. And people misinterpreted it. And it was under the lens of, there were some events that I didn't know about, and people were extra sensitive, and in the end it worked out. But I'd say since Liftlines has moved onto Instagram and I've built a bit of a following there, I have run into a lot more of the kind of internet troll culture, or people that maybe miss the nuance of the joke being a kind of locally oriented or a ski culture oriented humor or satire. And it's interesting because I'll always try to provide context in the comment or in a discussion on the thread, but the internet has also led a kind of a forum where people pile on, and sometimes disheartening to see the conversations that happen, and there's just a lack of openness to a different interpretation or meeting someone where they are, which I get it. We all have opinions. I'm not trying to make a futon, average, muddy brown, in the middle commentary, but I think it's more than just black and white or right or wrong, which is sometimes where comments lead.
What do you think is really important about political cartooning in our democracy? What makes it so different than just an editorial or, an article? I mean, people will cut out a cartoon and put it on their refrigerator, for example.
Yeah. So I love the visual language medium. And I had a cool opportunity to work at a design firm in Boston. Like, they invented the Swiffer and the Reebok pumps, really innovative design stuff. And they made a big point to include fast illustrators, basically cartoonists, people that can make a quick infographic or a quick paneled cartoon that tells a quick story, because they saw it as essential to capturing a really complex idea in an instant. I can write an executive summary about a problem, but you have to read it, and it takes time, and you have to remember the elements and how they relate together through like verbal explanation to arrive at your understanding. I think a comic or visual language in general, whether it's paneled or a single thing or an infographic, lets you see the big 30,000 foot view or highlight the important elements in a way that, for the design firm and for political cartooning, let you get at the nuance, like thread the needle solution or perspective or critique pretty quickly and effortlessly. And it transcends language. It transcends continents and geography. It transcends medium. As computers have gotten faster, it's easier to share images. Look at memes. Memes are visual language, and you can capture so much in a meme, and everyone can interact with it and get it instantly. People aren't posting paragraphs of text and memeing paragraphs. They're memeing images and pictures that have a visual relationship. So I think political cartoons, to bring it back, politics is nuanced, and it's important to put your message within that very clear and balanced and delicate context. And I think comics and cartoons do that very well. And I think it's why political cartoons have been around for hundreds of years. It hasn't gone away. It hasn't changed with the medium. It's a cool tool to have in your toolkit to have a discussion or make a statement.
Who are some of your favorites that have inspired you? Who are cartoonists?
Stylistically, I love Bill Watterson of Calvin and Hobbes. I kind of like the difference between the realism of his parents and the setting and the unrealistic depiction of the kids. It kind of is a layer of fantasy world, or the kind of lens in which a kid views the world. Artistically too, he has a lot of elements of like comic books and how he inks and colors and what he includes and how he frames that are pretty neat. His longer Sunday ones too, with the sequential panels that were 10 or whatever, he really played with timing and would set you up with a punchline or a pacing or a switch that that was totally controlled by the panels and their shaping and how close they were or how long they were or how open or closed they were, that I think was pretty masterful. As far as like humor, I loved, there's a couple of comics, Rhymes with Orange or Far Side or Tundra, that were all kind of single panel mostly, but totally absurd, weird, a little dad jokey, a little out there, a little nerdy, definitely a whole variety. Depends on the mood, depends on the context.
So I think one of the other things I'm curious about, because I think in some ways, political cartooning is meant to solicit a response.
Totally. Lift lines, even a comment about ski bro culture or fancy restaurants on the west bank of Jackson are meant to elicit a response. I don't think you should put anything out in the world that's not meant to elicit a response. Otherwise, that's just clutter. That's like a thoughtless social media marketing.
Okay. Well, the reason I said that is because what you were saying earlier about you don't really want to piss people off. That's not your intention anyway, but you still want to get a response. You still want to trigger a response to something you draw or make a statement about.
I'd like to clarify that, I guess.
Okay.
I see the world as very gray in almost everything. I don't think there's usually a perfect or right answer. And I would qualify like there's a difference between wanting to get a response and wanting to put someone down or be definitive or not appreciate the nuance of a context or a perspective or an interpretation. And so I think that's the difference between calling someone stupid and calling someone some other ridicule that maybe speaks a little bit more to their perspective on something. I have to think of a good example off the top of my head, but it's more than, I think a political cartoon shouldn't be name calling, shouldn't be saying this is the only way. I think the power of it and the beauty of it and the nuance of it is like it being dynamic and a little more aware. You don't just want a song to just be loud or sometimes just be the same tempo. It needs to change and be a little more delicate. And that's kind of where I come from. I also run in a family paper, and I have, I respect that it is presented to a wide audience. And I think that's a platform that I've chosen to lean into because that wide audience has many different views, and the comic will present my perspective the most effectively if it's not absolute in its perspective or in its statement, if it's kind of welcoming and open in a way to the complexity of something.
And I appreciate what you're saying, but I also think that political cartoonists usually are, they have their own political view that they're also, putting out there to the world. And we're in a time where we have this huge political divide where people aren't talking to each other and they're not building that bridge from one side to the other. And
100%.
In your cartoons, do you ever talk about some of those issues or draw about some of those issues?
I absolutely do. And maybe it's because I don't think of myself as just a political cartoonist. I'd say Lift Lines does some silly, escapist humor, a ton of dad jokes and puns. I love puns, but certainly takes political stances. I think I've been really big on wearing a mask. And a lot of my comics this year through COVID have been about social distancing, mask wearing, flattening the curve. Those have certainly brought out I've probably taken a pretty clear stance on that to my audience, and they certainly create discord and anger or lack of understanding in my comments online. But I guess ultimately the cartoon is in a digital world. The cartoon is more than just a cartoon. The cartoon is the statement that it makes, and it's the conversation that it drives in the comments. And maybe that's a broader definition of how I'm seeing it, but every single one of the people that's commented angrily about my pro-mask stance online, I've pretty much tried to engage with or understand where they're coming from or present kind of my side of the argument, not as this has to happen always, which the comic kind of takes that stance, but it's a foot in the door to at least approach that with someone that you might not be in your circle or in your regular kind of people that you communicate with.
I like that, Ryan, because in a sense, you have this great opportunity to talk to people from all kinds of political backgrounds and spectrums and, whatever they are. And like you said, it's a foot in the door to have a conversation.
Totally. I mean, I had a really interesting exchange last week, actually. So it was the first day that my comic ran that Biden was president, right? And so the comic is a picture of Biden holding some skis. Skis have a Biden-Harris sticker. And he's like, oh, these skis are going to make all the difference. They're going to be way better than my junky orange ones. And there's this guy and Biden's kind of on this precipice and it's all rocky and skied out and trees are down. And it's just like icy and gross where he's going to ski. And this other commenter in the comic says, well, I think it'll take more than new skis because it looks pretty rocky and skied out. And this guy came out swinging on Instagram, putting people down, being pretty angry about the election results and where the country was headed. And through like 10 pretty long back and forth comments on that comic, covering a whole range of political theories, economic realities, different sets of perspectives and facts on policy, I tried to kind of express to him, hey man, the comic really wasn't about Biden being president. It's about that Biden doesn't change the fact that the terrain that he has to ski down isn't great. There's more to, essentially the message of the comic was that there's more to solving the problems that we all feel as a society than just the president. And kind of while Biden was the character in it, the true punchline underlying message was that the terrain is broken. Our democracy, our culture, our communities are feeling a big strain and have a lot of obstacles in them. And we were able to kind of talk about that and come to an agreement. It ended up on kind of tax policy and the role of a safety net in a capitalist economy. And we were able to kind of agree on I think that there's some things that we need to do to be fair. And there's some things that we need to agree on. And there's some things where helping our fellow person, allows the holes to fill in and the sticks and rocks to be smoothed over so that we can have a smoother ride down the hill, so to speak. So for me, Instagram has been a pretty different medium for cartoons and comics than any other medium that I've had really as a platform, because there's so much more depth to it than just the comic. Even, the ability to do little animations or something of a cartoon can add another layer to it. And it's been really neat to not just kind of put things out in the ether, in a traditional publication, you make it, put it in the mail or email it, and it gets printed, and it's a one-way conversation. So.
Yeah, you're right. That's very, very true. I haven't thought about that. Tell me how people can learn more about you or follow you on your different platforms.
Yeah, I think the best place for jokes and funny stuff is Instagram. That's my handle is liftlines_comics. One word. The icon is a double black diamond. We're working on a website, but all those things will be right in the Liftlines profile. If you don't have Instagram or you're not into having the app, you can still view it online on a browser, just Instagram.com. And I post 3 times a day. It also publishes in the Jackson Hole Daily here in Jackson and our surrounding communities. And I think you'll see it's a different take on a political cartoon because it's kind of a political cartoons in the context of a pretty unique community, and a community that's really oriented in mountain lifestyle, mountain activities, has a lot of wealth inequality. So it's kind of a subset of a political cartooning as a whole, maybe. Right, exactly. I think so, because my mom doesn't get the jokes. Yeah, my mom doesn't get the jokes, and I think that's a testament to me really nailing the context. She does not live in Jackson and hasn't spent a ton of time here, and so maybe that means I'm doing something right, or at least keeping true to the inside joke of it all. Right. Well, if that's your goal, you're going to have to. That's where I'll start. That's where you'll start. Okay. That's where I'll start. I'll break out here and there. Okay. Good idea. Well, it's been great talking to you, Ryan. Thank you so much for having me, Emmy. Really, I love it when cartoons are getting the limelight. I think there's so much fun. There's something that stick with people from childhood to late adulthood,
Absolutely. For sure. I love when you open up the editorial section or just reading the cartoons. I mean, I remember Sundays with the big cartoon sections that they used to have. And that was like the first thing that we did was read the cartoons, right?
Totally. I read them every day. And actually, I would recommend to everyone, find some cartoonists that you like on Instagram. And if you follow enough of them, every time you open your phone, you'll get to basically read through the funnies. I get Calvin and Hobbes 5 times a day. And it's
you do?
Escape from the world. I do. And they bring up old memories, and they even post the date, like 1993. They've got a good run of monster snowman comics going right now. I would recommend everyone follow a couple cartoons in whatever medium you choose, Facebook, Reddit, online, email digest. It's an important thing in the world that we live in right now.
No, yeah, seriously. You have to laugh and enjoy life, even though a lot of other things are really crappy.
100%.
Okay, you have a great evening.
Thank you. You too, Emmy.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of What's Your Why? Brought to you by Wyoming Humanities with support from Wyoming Community Foundation and generous supporters like you. To learn more, go to thinkwhy.org, subscribe, and never miss a show.